go deep into consumer insights and spend the time learning with your consumers to make sure that as marketers and brand builders that you're participating, that you're not just outsourcing that, see how they behave, put it in a store environment where you can see what it looks like. Evaluate your decisions on your products with that kind of more in context knowledge.
You're listening to CPG Launch Leaders, the show where we interview new product trailblazers. Get ready for inspiration and secrets from the front lines of CPG innovation. Now here are our hosts, Darcy Ramler and Alan Peretz.
Welcome to CPG Launch Leaders. I'm Alan Peretz, and I'm here with my co-host, Darcy Ramler. Today, we're going to sit down with Heather Burgess. I've known Heather for a few years now. She's had an amazing career. It's been awesome to watch. She started off at P&G, where she jumped right into the world of innovation, and we'll talk about some of that today. She spent a few years at Amazon helping to shape their media offering, and now she's the CMO and a senior partner at Simpactful.
Heather will be talking to us about her work launching Max Factor's LIPFINITY. Today, we will discuss overcoming shopper hesitancy, getting creative with tiny ad budgets, and navigating supply issues when the buzz about your product outsizes inventory. Let's get this thing started.
Heather, so great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining Darcy and I today. We're going to talk a little bit about a big initiative you worked on in the past, but why don't we jump right in?
Sounds good.
Heather, it's great to have you on. Before we dive into this story, can you tell us currently what new product has caught your attention in the market?
I thought about this for a minute, and the product that I like the best, or that has caught my eye, is the OxiClean Max Force Gel Stick. And for those who I haven't met, I have children who are basketball players, very, very competitive basketball players.
Yep.
And it's helpful to have this stick on the road because it's really good at getting blood out of uniforms, and accidents do happen on the court. It really works on everything.
As a mom of a boy, absolutely understand that, because I am doing grass stains all the time out of soccer uniforms and everything. So I agree with you on that product, Heather.
Yeah, and Heather, I was going to ask, because I haven't seen the product, do they actually advertise this amazing blood capability on the front, or is that something that you just have to know?
Well, I had experience with the OxiClean brand in the past, and I found that it's really good for that. I got started because we were at a tournament, and I was trying to wash the uniform of one of my son's teammates. I was kind of helping out with him for the weekend. And so it does stay right here on the back that this works on 5 different types of stains: grease, oil, grass and blood, food stains, soil and clay, and drink stains. So it has this nubby top, and the gel product comes right out through the top. So it pushes the product up from the bottom. There's no messy powder that gets all over everything. It's well contained, and because it's the gel, it sort of sticks to the stain and actually does the work while the load is starting. So I found that it works perfectly. So I'm a big fan.
Well, let's talk about LIPFINITY. Tell us when you got started on this project.
Sure. So I was a newly minted assistant brand manager, and I joined Procter & Gamble back in the year 2000. So I started in after getting my MBA at Indiana, and I was assigned to the Max Factor brand. And at the time, the brand was a really small brand. We had 2 brands in the portfolio. I was sitting in the US offices, and we had CoverGirl, and then we had Max Factor. And globally, Max Factor was a very large brand. But in North America, it was a small brand. It was about a 4-share brand. So this was sort of daunting. It was a brand new technology. It had been in development for, I want to say, 10 years before I got there. There was a global design team that had worked on the innovation plan, and my job was to successfully launch this new form into market. And we were going to be the seeding brand that was going to launch it into market, and then CoverGirl was going to follow after about 6 months. So it was intended to help put some wins in the sails of the small brand before we rolled it out to the larger brand.
Nothing like starting off in a new seat and jumping into a project like this, right?
No kidding.
Just to kind of talk about the process to develop something first of its kind in the category. Talk us through what that process looked like and some of your approach to it.
Sure. Well, I wasn't involved in designing the product as much, but It was a collaboration between Procter and Gamble and another major manufacturer to look at a new technology that would help lip colors stay on longer. So at the time, there were three types. So you either had lip gloss, which was sort of petrolatum based, would melt off. It was very sheer and shiny and might have a little bit of sparkle in it. And then you had the old fashioned bullet lipsticks, or which were wax based. And, the traditional lipstick, a bullet shape that you could slip in your pocket. There were some newer, long, thin lip colors that were long wearing. So Revlon had a color stay product out there. And those were really the only products in the market. The challenge with all of those, so on the bullet lipstick and the lip gloss, the minute that those touched food oils or had any friction, they wiped right off. They broke down and wiped off. The other problem was that the heat from your body would actually melt them off. So what women would say is, I look great. I really want my lips to be the centerpiece of my face. A lot of women would say, my face is my business card, basically. It's who I represent to the world. I want to look polished and beautiful. And lipstick is that finishing touch that brings it all together. However, I look great when I put it on, but after just a bit of talking, or if God forbid I wipe my mouth or I eat anything, the whole look sort of melts away and I find myself reapplying throughout the day. There were also long wearing lip colors, but the long wearing lip colors really had a feel disadvantage. So they were very drying and very matte. And so the challenge for the technical team that delivered this is, how do you create a new lip color that will actually last all day so that someone doesn't have to reapply? They know that their lips will be polished and have full color and shine all day long. And that's especially helpful for women as they age and they get lip lines. And so that lipstick, as it melts, kind of migrates into the lines. And so they spent about 10 years developing this new product. And the form that they created was a two-step lip color, which was absolutely breakthrough at the time. So there was a paint, which had a doe foot, what they called a doe foot applicator, sort of like a lip gloss applicator, and you would paint it on your lips. And then there was a separate clear top coat that was a polish. And the paint used a technology from an outside party, and the polish came from some in-house technology that was in a different division in P&G that was in development.
I smile because as a avid red lipstick wearer, I firmly remember when Lipfinity came out and I was like, oh my goodness, it's a 2-in-1 step. It stays on. So I remember the product launch clearly.
Yes. So paint, polish, and forget about it. That was the original tagline.
Heather, it's so important to have a clear understanding of your prime prospect. Can you tell us about the person you were focusing on here?
We were really focused on full color lipstick wearers, whether they were long wearers or traditional bullet lipstick wearers. They were people who use lipstick at least 5 times a week. And we were not really looking to sell this to women who preferred lip gloss or that more sheer, shiny look, because this was truly a more opaque, full color product. And again, these women would talk about how lipstick really helped pull together their entire look. For some women, they only wore lipstick and no other makeup. And for other women, this was the finishing touch of a whole full made up look.
And when launching a product that has such a unique positioning, right? Or you're the first to market to kind of bring this technology, how did you go about identifying your competition and the strategy around that?
Yes. So we felt like the key competition for us was Revlon. So at the time, Revlon was really known for lip color, and that was their whole brand identity and equity, though we also were competing with brands in prestige. So MAC was on the rise, Lancome was big, L'Oreal within mass still had a fairly large lips business. So we needed to really have a plan that would stand out against these much larger brands that had much larger budgets. And so that was really the trick for this launch, was how do you launch something that's completely disruptive to the market and do it with a small budget? And that required that we really be savvy and smart about our plans to go to market.
So this was something really new and different. And when the shopper sees it, they may not really trust that it's going to do what they're being told it does. How did you overcome that hesitancy and drive trial?
That's such a good question. So the first thing that we did was we had a seeding program. So we actually, at the time, P&G still owned Sassoon salons. So it's a kind of a name from the past. But we actually seeded it with Sassoon stylists and their clients to start to get some feedback and word of mouth. And then we did an entire press launch. So we brought in beauty editors, and we actually, I still have one. It's the original press box where we seeded this to the beauty editors was a lunch box. So it was this fun execution to talk about these new colors. And we started to get a lot of press around this new product. So at the time, PR and beauty editor coverage was really key because people were still reading magazines. So we were really all over the beauty magazines between the editorial coverage and our ads. And we had signage in store, which was paint, polish, and forget about it. So we would show the 2 steps. And then we also did saleable samples. So we did a big sampling push. So we mailed out thousands and thousands of samples to people's homes. But we gave shoppers the opportunity to buy a sample. It was $2 for the sample, gave them 2 shades and a little mini top coat. And then there was a coupon on the back so that they could redeem it. And that gave us a lot of information around who was buying it and what the redemption rate was. And those displays sold out like instantly. So we knew that we had something big on our hands. We also had a lot of displays in store, so end caps and freestanding units that would sit on shelves in the kind of what's new part of the cosmetics department. And we were getting lots and lots of trial off of those displays with this header image that really showed these beautiful full colored lips in this kind of step 1, step 2 commercialization.
Obviously, there were shopper barriers you had to address because there is this gap of great, you have this new innovative product, but believability is there's a gap in between there and convincing not only the shopper, but also the retailers. So can you kind of talk us through a little bit of your sell-in process when it came to the retailers as well?
So the retailers that were always looking for category news, and they were also really looking for margin. So the price point for Lipfinity was breakthrough at the time. So traditional bullet lip colors were selling for somewhere around between $3 and $4. Long wearing lip color was more in the $7 to $8 range. And we went out with a price of $12.50, which at the time was disruptive. It was like, oh my goodness, is this actually going to work? We were bordering on like Clinique pricing in mass. They were sort of prestige. They were sort of bottom of prestige at the time. And there was a lot of question, but what we did was we went in and we shared the technology with them. We did some early engagement with key retailers to share with them this product as it was being developed. We had some really cool demos where we would show traditional lipstick and how it would break down in food oil versus a ball of the paint for Lipfinity, and how it had been in this, food oil for months and still hadn't broken down. And we did a lot of blot testing, and we did lots and lots of live demos to help them understand how breakthrough this technology was going to be on their store shelves. And then we gave them margin to help drive it and a lot of promotional display. So the sell-in for this product, we actually got over 20,000 doors, which at the time for Max Factor was a lot. Most retailers took 1, if not 2 displays. The buyers felt like this was going to be very disruptive. And then the key challenge became once we launched it, it pulled through so fast, we didn't have enough supply to be able to replenish the displays. So we had to go on allocation, and then we were really we had a daily meeting to manage the allocation of product because this thing was so hot.
Today in beauty, you're not going to be able to launch really well without influencers and social media. What did you do in the days before all of that existed?
Well, we use beauty editors as our influencers. So that was one key piece of it. As the launch got going, we had a wave 2. So 6 months in, this product was so hot. We had a piece of copy that was developed by the global team. It was called Sexy Eating. And it showed this woman on a date. And she was eating, and she did kind of a white napkin blot on her lips, and nothing came off. And we hadn't tested the copy in the US. And so I carved out money from the budget and said, let's go ahead and test it. And we had $1 million set aside for a TV budget. Now, at the time, minimum sufficiency for TV was going to be about $20 million. So I had a drop in the bucket. And we tested the copy, and it scored absolutely off the charts, like the highest scoring copy the category had ever seen. So we were like, well, I think we should air the copy. So we aired the copy and it started to take off. The way that we stretched the budget was to use PR and influencers. So we did a satellite media tour. We did it in conjunction with a demo event at food festivals around the country. So we would go to food festivals. We had a campaign that featured models who were using food as fashion props in the campaign. So there was one model named Cleo Pasta, and she had a pasta wig on, and another model who had a meringue as a hat. And so we had these Cleo Pasta models at these food festivals, and they were demoing the product to people who were at the actual festivals. And then we did a satellite media tour, and we brought in, we kind of took the product around, and we did lots and lots of satellite media interviews. And the thing took off like wildfire. So people would say, I saw this on TV. I saw this on TV. And we were like, the only way you could have seen it on TV is if you caught one of our $1 million, TV spots, our precious few 30-second spots. We may have run 3,000 of them, or you must have seen it when it was on the news. From there, it just continued to snowball. It got bigger and bigger and bigger. So it's just a thrilling time to be a part of a brand and really trying to problem solve for, much like brands are doing today with influencers. How do you create awareness and trust and trial for something in the absence of having a mass budget? So very rewarding experience.
Absolutely. And obviously it was a wildly successful launch for Max Factor.
Hi, Jesse. What brings you to the airport?
Mike, I'm off to the headquarters to share an update on the big launch.
Oh, I've heard it's selling really well. Care to share your secret?
Well, just between us, it's all thanks to Bold Labs. Their exclusive digital test market research allows you to optimize your product, marketing, and pricing before the big launch.
That sounds fantastic. How can I learn more?
Just visit www.boldlabs.com. It's all right there.
This is the final call for Flight 723 to Chicago.
Looks like we'd better go. Thanks for the tip, Jesse.
See you soon, Mike. And remember, Bold Labs is ready to help your product soar.
I think that it really all comes back to insights. So on Max Factor, the brand's equity was all about the makeup of makeup artists. And so it was more of this full color look. It was more polished. And one of the things that we saw was from that original piece of copy that the napkin blot was the big, that was the key demo in the spot. And that's what we saw with the food festivals. The wow factor happened when a consumer would put on this product and then blot their lips, and they would see no transfer of color at all. And so that was our strategy, was our second wave of copy where we had the Cleo Pasta and all of the models. Our claim was the world's first food-proof lip color. So kind of putting that, kind of superiority claim really drove a lot of trial. CoverGirl named their product Outlast. And the original idea was it outlasts your day any day. And there was an ad at the time that featured Molly Sims. And it was sort of showing her, a young working woman going throughout her day. And it just showed her lips looking good over time. There were never any torture tests in the ad. And it completely fell on its face. There was no demand for the product. It was sort of a sleeper. And then the team looked at what was working on Max Factor and said, wait, we need to step back. And they went back and reshot copy. And it was an iconic ad that featured Brandy, who at the time was an up-and-coming musical artist. And she was eating a Granny Smith apple. And she had these, bright kind of magenta lips. And she held up the apple with a bite out of it. And there was, again, no sign of any lip color on the white flesh of the apple. And from there, then it took off on both brands. So there really were some, mistakes. We made mistakes on Max Factor too. There was not a window in the box at launch, and there were locking slits on the top of the carton. And so consumers would open it up and take out the color to try and test it. And when they did it, it would cause a lot of damages. And so when CoverGirl came out, there was more color representation on the box. They started with a window. We had to soft convert our way in. So we were definitely learning back and forth between the two brands as a joint category on, how do we make this technology be as big as possible?
And on those, when you had to convert a little bit, on your guys' side of things. How did you backstep? And then how quickly were you able to do that? And was it a costly backstep?
Yeah, so we recognized very early on with the launch that we were seeing high damage rates. And because the product was so expensive in store, that was really costing the brand. So we made the change to the new carton within weeks of launch. We recognized that we were creating too much damage. And so we went back and did a soft conversion where we just started to soft convert in these boxes that had a hole cut in them. It was like a penny upcharge. So it wasn't significant, but it did significantly cut down on the waste. We actually also eventually eliminated the locking slits in the top of the box so that consumers could open the product, take a look at it, because the color representation, even through the tube, wasn't actually what you got. It was a smoky gray plastic that was used. And so you really couldn't see the vibrancy of the color. And shade is the number one driver in lip color. So no matter, even if you have the longest wearing stuff ever, if the shade isn't right, she won't buy it. So we recognized that we needed to change that fast. And then with time, we also added more color to the front of the boxes. And that, because again, in lip color, what we learned is that you need to have at least 24 shades. You need to show a breadth across the palette, and you need to put them in a certain order so that people can easily select and deselect. And so we did all of those things. It did take us a couple of months, and CoverGirl was able to adapt a little bit faster because we were learning with the mistakes that we made on Max Factor early on.
So before every launch, or at least every launch I've been a part of, there's that moment where things feel like they've gotten a little bit off the rails, or you're facing some big issue you didn't expect, and you've got to make a tough choice. Did you face that at all in this process?
The biggest thing that we faced was that we were not ready for the demand that we would have. And that was honestly the biggest challenge, was figuring out how do you allocate the very limited supply that you have when suddenly you have retailers. You've got Walmart and Target who are behind the brand, but you have retailers who maybe hadn't been as big of supporters of the brand in the past who want to now support this thing. We also started to see that there was support from movie makeup artist stores. So like Namies is a big store that's in New York and LA, and that's where all the makeup artists go. And so there was a lot of demand for new distribution as well. And so figuring out how do we support all of that was really the biggest challenge that we had. And we met every single day. It was sort of all hands on deck. We would talk about what supply was coming in, what supply could go out. We would modify as we needed to. The retailers just couldn't get enough of it. So that was probably the biggest challenge that we had to face.
Yeah, I think for marketers, supply problems are almost more painful than demand problems. I don't know if you'd agree.
Absolutely. I felt like my job in some way, I was like, it just took off. But then what do you do once you've got demand and you can't meet it? And you've got retailers that are finally excited about this brand and momentum behind it, and you can't fulfill it.
Did you feel that it affected your guys' repurchase rates? You lost momentum at any point in that? How did it influence you guys?
We caught up fairly quickly. I would say about 6 months in, we had grossly ramped up our manufacturing capability, because at this time, the US was behind, Max Factor was behind the launches around the rest of the world, and it was taking off everywhere else as well. And we were producing in Ireland. So we had one plant that was producing everything for everyone. And then they had to stand up CoverGirl as well. So no one was anticipating that this would be as popular as it was. So it was popular, all over Europe and Asia. And then obviously it took off in the US with 2 brands. We probably traded some volume across CoverGirl and Max Factor. They came out with a slightly larger palette than we had. So they just had a few more shades and slightly different shades. But that was fine from a P&G standpoint. We were winning as a collective cosmetics organization.
Absolutely. And we've talked a little bit about the pre-launch and the launch. Can you tell us about the post-launch success of LIPFINITY?
Sure. So the growth of Max Factor LIPFINITY, actually, we doubled the size of the brand, and it was really behind this product. We did line extended over time. So we came out with a few different versions of it. So we came out with a more sheer, softer version. Some people didn't like the feel of it. It's sort of a heavier feel. So we came up with a sheerer formula that was a little softer and easier to blend if people wanted to blend shades. It was called Everlights. We also tried to extend the benefit of kind of the affinity benefit into foundation and mascara, and they were not as successful. And the reason is that the wow wasn't there, and there were some barriers. And the mascara side, it could work, but there was no wow. So the product that we put with the name didn't have anything really unique. And in foundation, consumers didn't want anything that was heavy and cakey. So as a brand, Max Factor was known for being a little heavier and cakier because the Max Factor was a movie makeup artist. He was actually a Russian wig maker who got into makeup with the starlets that he worked on. And he developed Pancake and Pan Stick, which were very heavy makeup. They were used in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and consumers still associated heavy and cakey with us. And that was a negative. So having a face-finity foundation, while they wanted long wear, they wanted breathability as well. And so neither of those products really stuck, but we tried.
I was going to say, there's a difference between not wanting your foundation to rub off, but then in the same token, not lasting so long that you can't get it off. So yeah.
Get it off.
Exactly.
Right. But we did try because it was this franchise was so popular. We attempted to launch them and they just didn't perform in the same way. Max Factor LIPFINITY eventually went on and we licensed the technology to a prestige player because the product was so powerful. And frankly, innovations like this in the cosmetics industry typically come around every 10 years or so. I had the opportunity to work on a second one. So when they come out, even competitors look to license things because the formula was so breakthrough. The benefit was so breakthrough.
Now, Heather, I know you work with a lot of brands today, so you're up to speed on the innovation process as it exists now. How would you say it's different than back in the LIPFINITY days?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
Product innovation.
Yeah, so from a product innovation standpoint, I do a lot of work in that space. I would say there are 2 or 3 areas where I feel like things have gotten better. So one is companies that are doing innovation well don't just look at product appeal, they also look at the shopper. And that work wasn't done. So when this product was designed early and handed off to me, no one really looked at it in store and said, how is this going to come to life in each of the markets? And that was a big miss. We would have caught things had we done more transactional learning experiments or even just done more modeling in store. We would have known that the lack of the window in the box was going to be a problem and that the locking slits were going to be a problem. We didn't do like a company store. We would have seen all of those issues and been able to get ahead of them. I think the other thing that at least I work with my clients on is nonverbal communication cues. And I think the original team did a decent job with that. On CoverGirl, they missed them, but really getting clear on how do you have this thing sell itself without a lot of words was key. And so I work with a lot of clients on that now and looking at how do you communicate things without a big 3-paragraph concept, because in today's day and age, you don't have 30 seconds to sell something. You might just have a quick digital, still ad or a video ad, or you might just have signage in store or a product detail page. And so you need to be able to sell something and instantly click with someone. And we learned some of those insights later in the project versus getting clear on them early, before launch. Had we known them before launch, they would have been in the communication. Fortunately, we learned them quickly and were able to adapt. The third area would just be demand planning. So kind of forecasting what the volumes might look like for this product would have been key. And that would have helped it probably fuel it to be much bigger than it was, because we wouldn't have run out of supply during that critical trial phase where distribution was building, our awareness and our PR plan was really kind of scaling, and people wanted to try it. We had a lot of probably pent up trial that we could not fulfill. So I would say those are the 3 areas where I've seen major improvements in processes.
Heather, you mentioned the term when you were talking transactional learning experiment. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So within the innovation space, transactional learning experiments are those in which the consumer or the shopper has the opportunity to transact in some way, where they need to exchange something that they care about for your product, and you're getting a better gauge of whether or not they would be willing to part with their precious money or their time or their effort to go find and buy and try your product. So that could look like transactional learning experiments, can look like company stores where maybe you sell your products in-house. That can look like an experiment where someone has to, do you want to buy this for $100 today? And maybe you're putting people on a wait list. You don't even have product to sell them, but you say, like, in theory, would you like for $200, I can sell you product today. Oh, look, we've just run out, but I can put you on the wait list. There are different ways that you can execute it, but what you're trying to gauge is if there was a transaction, how many people would participate? What sort of behavior would you expect to see? So the more that brands can do that and gauge the likelihood of trial and repeat ahead of launch, the better. Oftentimes, they're able to better forecast demand. They're able to identify problems with a launch before they get out into market, so that they can make last-minute changes that reduce risk, reduce cost, reduce waste, and drive upside potential.
Perfect.
Amazing. So obviously, ton of learning and insights that you take from this launch. But if you had to give advice to CPG leaders today out there working on a new product launch, what would be your one piece of advice for them?
My biggest piece of advice would be to really go deep into shopper and consumer insights, and to spend the time learning with your consumers to make sure that as marketers and brand builders that you're participating, that you're not just outsourcing that, to try and have the product be used in a natural setting, to watch people using it, to see how they behave, to put it in a store environment where you can see what it looks like, not only what it looks like, but how people behave, and then to evaluate your decisions on your products with that kind of more in context knowledge. Oftentimes, I think when teams do that, they learn really important elements about how to communicate a product, what the benefit is or the job, who the right target audience is, how to connect with the consumer or the shopper in order to be able to drive conversion. I think today there are many ways to do that online or physically in person.
So what are you working on today, Heather?
Yeah, so I am a partner with Simpactful, and I run our marketing, e-commerce, and innovation practice areas. I am using my collective experience from 17 years at P&G, where I had the opportunity to work as a brand management, a brand manager, going back and forth between what I'll call brand franchise roles and go-to-market roles. And then I moved over and was the professor of brand building and innovation for the company, where I helped to think about big idea models and go out and work with teams on how to design innovation to be more successful, and then led a team on the brand building framework before rounding out my experience there with P&G Ventures, where I was working on new to the world brands and innovations. And then I left and went to Amazon. So I actually spent nearly 4 years at Amazon, working on retail, and then moving over and selling advertising. So I'm now using all of those experiences and working with clients on their marketing, e-commerce, and innovation challenges. And I absolutely love it. A lot of fun.
Who do you like better, P&G or Amazon?
Ooh, they're different.
I was going to say, give the diplomatic.
Yeah. So it's very funny. My nephew is a student at the University of New Hampshire, and I actually did a course where I looked at the differences between the two companies. And there are some major, major differences. And it kind of starts when you go back to the origin. So P&G was founded by two brother-in-laws, and they were married to two sisters. And so family was always at the core of P&G. And the company promotes from within, but as you get promoted from within, you get to know everyone, Alan. That's how you and I got to know each other. For better or for worse, it's sort of like family. You know each other, and you know your strengths and your weaknesses, but you're always family. Amazon was not afraid. Jeff Bezos kind of set out to really be, the largest retailer out there, and he was not afraid to break things in the process. And Jeff, it wasn't about family. It was about finding the best talent. And so you didn't know one another. You didn't know your background. Everyone had a tremendous amount of respect for one another. And the company was incredibly innovative. Like that was in the DNA of the company, but those interpersonal relationships were not as strong. And so I remember when I was in advertising sales, I would say, just like start by asking how people's kids are, how their families are, like friend them on Facebook. Like it is really important that you do that, because at P&G, everybody grew up and we all knew, we were together from the time that we were single and then getting married to having children. And you kind of go through different life stages together. And at Amazon, it was a different kind of place. It was, people came together and they brought their brilliance and their expertise from other places, but they weren't like family. So it was just a different experience, not better or worse, just different.
I like it. Well, Heather, thank you so much for sharing your story and journey with launching Max Factor's category-defining Lipfinity products. Stories like yours remind us to keep innovating, stay inspired, and let's continue to redefine the world of CPG innovation. Thanks, Heather.
Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
You've been listening to CPG Launch Leaders, a show from Bold Strategies Incorporated. Don't miss the next thrilling launch story. Follow the podcast on your podcast player now. Please give us a rating, leave a comment, and share episodes with your friends. Until next time.